But in Dani's case, I just want to say that I was on LinkedIn, and I was just going through a conversation between you and Rachel Simpson, I think it was. And Rachel had said, "Oh, you should get yourself an apprentice." And I read this, I thought, "Oh, I don't see your word and everything." I thought, "Oh, crikey, well, maybe we should." So I approached you, I think, from that stage, didn't I? And so first time I really met you in person. So yeah, just so you get people to come and talk to you, if you can have a chance your arm. But yeah, so I'm going to introduce Dani Molyneux from Dotto Studios. So, big round of applause. Thank you.
Hi everybody. Can you hear me? So I've got this weird little microphone that I've got to hold like this. So yeah, okay, good. Yeah, hi. I'll get the awkward beginning bit out of the way before I settle in. But my talk is called The Winding Tale of Communicating Big Ideas, Thoughts and Feelings. I'm going to start with a bit of an introduction to me. I'm Dani Molyneux and my studio is called Dotto. What is a Dotto, you might ask? Well, it is a design studio, it's a creative workshop, it's a print store, and it's a person. And in that, there's a few things that I do. So it'll be things like branding. Oh, it's going to get a little animation to work. And within branding, I class that as kind of any sort of identity. It covers editorial design, marks, books, brands, all that kind of stuff. I also do what I call creative typography. So there's some sort of examples quickly here. That kind of stuff that I'll talk about in a minute. I'm creating it wrong thing, and I've also started taking those out into the wild a little bit as well, this sort of thing. And I've also got a domestic course as well, which is about creating playful typography. So that's that. And also, it's a person, which is me. And I'm basically the person that does most of the things at Dotto. So I do work with other people, I do collaborate a lot with other people, but essentially if you're working with Dotto, you're working with me. Okay, so I'm from St Helens, which I don't know if any of you know. Lovely St Helens, it's a beautiful picture. And it's world class in glass. And I feel a bit guilty for plugging off my hometown, so that's a bit of a nicer picture of St Helens. Yeah, I always wanted to be a fashion designer, not a graphic designer, for as long as I can remember. Like, Vivienne Westwood was one of my heroes. And as you can see, that's a picture of me as a kid, really fashiony, wearing the same thing as my sister, and there's one of my amazing designs at the top. So you might be wondering why on earth I didn't make it as a fashion designer, but there we go. How have I put that? Basically, oh I know, it's because when I wanted to do fashion design, there wasn't really a fashion design kind of class or course when I was at school, so I kept getting put in the textiles group. So I was doing sort of, like printing on textiles and all sorts of things. I remember there was this one time in textile class and I was just making kiwi fruit batik. I was like, no, this can't do it, this isn't for me. So I had a really good tutor, and he introduced me to the idea of graphic design and visual communication. So that's kind of when I started to swap the kind of thing that I was going to do. So I've had a really winding kind of career path, so that's why there's kind of loads of slides of me sort of walking it through. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that before I talk about work and things. So I went to school, I went to art college in Leeds, I worked in London for a bit, some big agencies, I came back up north, worked in Manchester, I worked at a place where creativity went to die, then I went to Liverpool, then I went freelance, then I set up Dotto. So it's a bit of a kind of winding tale. Yeah, I think I covered that. I went to art college at Leeds. Leeds Arts Uni it's called now. It was called Art College when I was there, but it's upgraded. That's me looking really happy at uni with a bunch of us on a Barcelona trip, so I don't know why we look so pissed. Yeah, anyway, so what I'm going to talk about is through all of that kind of the ongoing search for the big idea. So I'm going to talk about 3 projects that I did when I was at uni. I don't know why really, but I thought it would be helpful. So the first one, I haven't really kept most of the stuff, so the first one I remember, we were working on a project for lastminute.com, and it was an advertising project. And I had this idea, like, we got really excited about coming up with the ideas bit, because that bit felt like you know you could do something right or wrong. Like in this kind of career, it's not like maths where there's a right answer or a wrong answer. So if you solve a problem and come up with an idea and get this kind of aha moment, it felt really good. So for lastminute.com, I didn't keep the work, but it was basically, my idea was about apologising for all the ridiculous things and the ways you'd let people down by going on a lastminute.com holiday. I thought this was genius, to be honest. And I designed all these things. I put like apologies in like restaurants and all sorts and sorts of places. I was dead excited. I got a really crap mark. I was like really gutted. I just couldn't understand it. My tutor was like, yeah, it's a good idea, Dani, but it looks like crap. You know, this typography's terrible. Yeah, sorry. So I was like, right, okay, undefeated. So the next project I did was, it was a competition brief, and it was, I can't remember who it was for, but it was like an editorial competition brief. And the brief was, present both sides of an argument. So I was like, brilliant. I came up with this, I printed it on, screen printed it on this translucent paper, both sides of an argument. I was like, this is flipping amazing, this is competition win, oh my god, I'm a genius. And again, it was just like dust in the wind. And I didn't really understand why that hadn't done very well, but kind of thinking about it now, the project was for an editorial brief, you know, it was quite serious. They really wanted like both sides of an actual proper argument presenting. So I just kind of done this thing, and it was like, yeah, nice one, very clever, but completely useless. So it was kind of not for the right audience, it was more about my ego. Yeah, so, you know, I cracked on. So then the next one, this actually did all right. It looks like complete shit now, I do realise. This was a while ago. And this was for Johnny Walker Whiskey, and it was a point of sale campaign, and it was about presenting Johnny Walker Whiskey to different audiences. So I was working with I think Frank Aaron in the picture, and it was about, we came up with this sort of line about for those with social spirits, and we made Johnny Walker this kind of old ghost figure. So we had the idea of presenting like a ghostly sort of, what you call it, hallucination type thing. On, you know, like walking around the bars. We made beer mats that were things like tarot cards for different things on the cards tonight. We printed like seance hands on the bar tables, and we actually got accommodation for D&AD. We got to go down to London, and we're very exciting. And when I look back at that now, like it looks terribly, it's so badly mocked up. It's really, really amateur, but in this case, at least the idea was strong enough, like it was for the right audience. You could kind of see where we were going. So I felt like, you know, slowly and surely, I was sort of getting the hang of it, getting on where it was. Okay, oh god, that's, yeah, the font's not loaded. So everything's going to be really wonky. So please ignore the leading on this. Yeah, so idea and craft, obviously really important, and then adjust to the right audience, because otherwise, what's the point? Fast forward to my first job. I worked in a company in London called Shepherd Day, and this was, you know, my first time to London, little northern girl, and I worked in this. It was like an old monk place. What's it called? A monk place? Thank you. A monastery. And the guys that owned the company lived in Winston Churchill's old apartment. It was super posh. It was super posh, and it was really weird going there. And they used to do things like they hold soirees for their friends and invite the staff, and we'd be given different glasses because we weren't allowed the posh champagne. So yeah, it was a bit of a weird learning curve. But the reason I got that job apparently was because they wanted me to come up with ideas. So I've gone in with this terrible portfolio, and they've gone, you know, they'd seen through it and they'd seen ideas. So that was exciting, but the first job that I ever got was to present a big, massive brochure, to design a big brochure. I could barely use the computer, so it was all really, really stressful. And this job basically was all about, like, you know, annual reports and that kind of thing. So it was a real quick learning curve, learning how to use all the programs. This was one of the earlier jobs that I did for them when I learned how to use the computer. And it was for the Advertising Standards Authority. And, like, again, now when I look back, it's not a stupid, like crazily original idea, but it was about presenting this annual report as a newspaper, because there were all these different kinds of mass amounts of information, and it was how to get that across. So yeah, that was the kind of thing that I was doing there. Oh yeah. So basically, I'm not going to talk you through my whole flipping career, but fast forward through a bunch of jobs. I've basically worked on literally all the things. So corporate communications and annual reports where I started. I did brand packaging for retail, advertising campaign launches, art direction, fashion shoots, editorial design, publishing, branding, strategy and design. I feel like I've literally done like everything. Yeah. So it makes it sound really good. I go, yeah, I've worked on international fashion shoots, but also coin plaster packaging and old people's pants. So this was one of the highlights of my career. I used to work on these kind of projects for coin plasters. Real highlight was working on a flat binding pill. That was nice. So yeah, things are always amazing, but got to just keep cracking on. And yeah, I'll put this in really quickly. This was an amazing fashion shoot that I art directed. So, you know, big pants, all good. Well on that one. And then actually, I did all that and then landed a bit more of an artsy branding gig at Uniform in Liverpool, who I've just been speaking. So that was really great for me because it kind of brought together a lot of things I was interested in. I was really interested in branding, I was really interested in design and that kind of thing, and had a real passion for like arts-based clients. So at the time when I was working there, a lot of my clients were these sort of arts-based clients. So I've been working on things like this with the Creative Council, a little arts organisation called Lantern House. And I feel like this is where I really got to push and play with typography as well. So even things like this was for, literally got no words, what they called people that make pens and stuff, stationers, thank you. I worked on, this was like a brand values project for stationers, and it was trying to use the products that they make, so things like hole punches, tape, ink, highlighter pens, and making these big artsy prints based on their values. So, it was quite nice to pair this sort of typography and ideas and, like craft and all of those things. So, got to work on a lot of really nice projects there. And this is where I started working with the Liverpool Everyman and Playhouse theatres as well. So again, I used to do things like their show promotion. So this, for example, was part of a suite of, like the theatre productions. And for every single one, came up with an idea for each show and how we could present it and then do a little photo shoot. So, like this was about when, I can't remember what the play was about, but like when we were married. Kind of made this little crafty, whatever it's called, and price tag. And then the hypochondriac, which, it's this little medicine thing. It did actually, when we did the photo shoot, there were actually leeches. We had one with leeches and it was all green. It was really spooky. It was really good. But it was meant to be a comedy, so I had to make it a bit brighter. And one of the last projects I worked on when I was at Uniform was for the Oxford Playhouse. And this was a really ace job because it was kind of again about, I think the idea was something like Oxford Playhouse being, like at the heart of the city, or that was at the part of the fabric of the city of Oxford. So I just put these in because this is the kind of things, like that I would present. I come up with all these sketches and ideas, put them together into a presentation, and we'd send that over to the client. And in this case, it was about making the OP, which was their logo, real, a big real life logo. So we actually built it with these theatre producers and then photographed it around different places in the city. I left it about this point, so there's only a little bit of stuff here. So yeah, it looks kind of researched that, but that was an actual photo shoot of the OP floating around in the theatre. Take a breath. Okay, so that was basically where I started. And where I am now is doing my own practice, which is Dotto. So basically, when I started that, I literally worked on anything that I could get hold of. So brand identities for literally anyone. Again, everything would always start with a concept and an idea, and because of that, I was able to at least push things a little bit creatively, even when there were these lots of little tiny jobs. So I worked on all sorts of things from like, this was a biostatistician, I can't remember what they did, but it was something about untangling information. So I worked for a dentist, and it was based in this place called Hill, which was up in a little village. It was super, super pretty. So this kind of these lines, I had things like that, and I teach Shine Bright on Finkel Hill. I think that was the line that I started with, and they bought into it, and it ended up into this like, kind of really illustrative branding job. So even little jobs, you know, you can kind of have fun with. I did accountancy. This was like my range of clients at the time. And this was about making accountancy beautifully simple, so it was like folding receipts into little shapes. And I even did a suite of old people's homes as well, which is this. And the idea behind this was the care that they give at these homes is bespoke. You know, they treat everybody differently. So it's this idea that everybody fits, no matter kind of who they are. So I ended up being able to do something really, really playful for them. So, you know, this is kind of where I started. So again, always about the idea, trying to bring in the craft and kind of make everything feel playful and bright and kind of all of those things. But yeah, my client base was literally all over the place. Oh yeah, I've said that, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, what I wanted to do was what I was really interested in was to build that into an arts-based clients again. So that's where I started working towards. And that started to really work out. So I was working with people like Quarantine, which are a Manchester-based arts organisation. They used to run different projects, and with this one, it was called Meet the Neighbours, and they were working with somewhere in Salford, and it was a place, an urban splash house, and they were getting artists to do residencies. And I didn't want to give too much away at this point. So this identity was created with these kind of sort of slashes through, and it was about that kind of idea when you don't really know your neighbours and you're peeping through corners and you're looking through windows and blinds. So that kind of led the style of everything. So that's how the images worked, that's how the identity worked. The little frolic came in, had this little slash. So, I mean, as Richard was saying before, once you've sort of got this idea, everything else can kind of roll through. So even though it's very simple, but it still makes the design part like way easier. And from them as well, I was working on their brand identity. So with something like this, it was a lot more subtle in terms of ideas. It was kind of working on something they had already, which was the flag of Quarantine and how the typography could work within their branding. And for something like this is a book that they produced which showcased all of their work. And for something like this, I could really, really pare things back and make it really, really simple, because they had all this interesting language and kind of all these words, these weird phrases, like that's why we do our work like this, I want to kiss you, all this strange stuff. So basically, they kind of summed up images already, so I was able to make everything really, really pared back. I worked on things, again, for the Overwhelm and Playhouse theatres. And by this point as well, I was really starting to push the typography and be kind of more playful with it. So for something like this, I think they come to me and they said they wanted something a bit different, and they wanted to really get across a kind of feeling. And with the theatres, they're quite good at like giving you quite fluffy briefs sometimes. It's like, I wanted to feel like spring or something. So with this, it was trying to create, the typography is quite Art Deco, it was sort of born from their buildings, and this kind of spring palette, and you're like super, super subtle. So it's not like this kind of big idea, but it's like thinking and trying to get across a feeling. So I think that's when work started to look a bit more sort of subtle and different. So yeah, that's another guide. And saying, you know, just a few more kind of artsy jobs. Yeah, so that was all great. I built up all these lovely artsy clients, and then we had a pandemic, so that was good. And I think I've got a chart of what happened with my work. Yeah, that's what happened with my work. So when theatres shut, and arts clients work, turns out graphic designers don't have any work. Now, some people I know have work. There was a friend of mine who had a hand sanitizer client. They were doing fine, but this was my situation. So at this point, I had to sort of, I don't know, start thinking about things differently. So the first thing I was doing, because I didn't have any actual work, I sort of was homeschooling, I was doing all of these kind of crazy things anyway, but I needed to have some kind of outlet. So I started just making things, and at the beginning it was just for social media. So at that beginning bit of the pandemic, when everyone was doing all the clapping for the nurses and all that kind of crap, I was just doodling, and it was this kind of like heart key workers thing. I just posted it on social media, it was just like nothing. But a friend of mine works in the NHS, and he was like, I really want that as a pin badge. So I made these key worker pin badges, and then I sold them to raise money for whatever the NHS charity thing was. And everybody bought them. Everyone was sending all these little notes around. I had like a little kind of thing where you could write a gift, like notes. And people were writing these notes for me to write out to people, and it was like, oh my God, thank you so much for looking after us. So it's like, it was this weird little job that wasn't a job, it was keeping me occupied, it felt like it was doing something, and it felt like it was connecting with people. So it was kind of this communication through typography that was talking to people in a slightly different way. So I started to just do more of those things. So it was kind of, just trying to make connections with people. And a lot of this work at the moment, this stuff, it's not amazing work. I was just making like blasts for social media. So this was working with, it's a friend of mine who's an animator, and it was just words with like new ways. We didn't even know really what we were saying, and this wasn't really based on anything. I was just making like pathways. We just wanted to kind of, again, talk to people. When they started to lock down the students, when they first went back to uni, my studio is by all of those studios, and they were all making these post-it note protests in the windows. They looked like amazing. So I started to create that out of typography. Again, as a kind of way to reflect that that anger on their behalf. And then even really ridiculous things like stories that started to happen. Like in lockdown, the first person, well, it's not even the person that came to, the first person that wasn't like a family member that was in my house was a parrot. There was an escaped parrot. I can't even believe this happened. There was an escaped parrot just in our local area that flew in our window, ended up in our house, and then this random family had to come in and rescue the parrot. That was the first time anyone had been in the house, and the parrot hated the dad, the guy that was trying to get the parrot out. So I was chasing a parrot from the shower to the sink. It was just crazy. So again, I just made this thing. It's not amazing, but I was just I made this thing, it told a little story, had a chat with people, and it was just about connecting and kind of talking to people. So I just carried on. I was making things that were kind of trying to be, again, positive messages, this sort of new dawn, a new day, just know something good's going to happen, those kind of things, and sending them around. These little We the People. So it kind of just set me on this different, slightly different path. So that's kind of a slightly different arm of my work, which, creative typography, and I've sort of described it as communicating a kind of thought or a feeling. And one of the first things that I'd started to do that makes more sense was this kind of thing. And this was a competition, sort of brief for, was it Design Manchester? No, I can't remember the thing. Design Manchester. And the brief was, if you could go back to art school, what would be the one thing you would tell yourself, or what would be the new rule? And I chose this, take up more space. And again, the typography, it's super awkward, it's sort of filling the space in a really uncomfortable, weird way, and that's what I was trying to say, sort of take up much space as awkwardly and whatever we want. And those kind of messages, they started to resonate with people. I painted it with Oscar, who's a street artist. We painted it on a wall for fun. That was good. And again, this is when I started making more things for the print shop as well. So there's a bit of a connect, some things for clients, some things for the print shop. And it meant I could really communicate things that I wanted to do. There was no client. Yeah, I could just talk to sort of people directly. And this one was one of my most popular prints, which was not yet but soon. And again, it's super, super simple, but it's one of those messages. It's not like, it's not sickeningly positive, but it is kind of optimistic. And it's this idea that you're like, I don't know, if you're feeling a bit down, you're like, or you know, you're going through something, you know, like it won't last, you know, like, or you might get a no now, but it's not yet, it's soon. And something with this again, you know, like this, it looks like a sun. It kind of feels optimistic. The way the soon's written out is that kind of like soon, you know, like so it's just kind of communicating these things like slightly differently to how I've done before. I started making kind of little protest prints as well when. You know, like we've come out of the pandemic and everyone wants the designers to do things for free for them, and I was like, no more free. So this was kind of the colours of money. Did that, and this was another Design Manchester thing, which was we had to come up with something that was just related to truth. And again, it's not quite pandemic again, and everything gone, but anyway, this was Stay Alert Truth Twisters. And it was kind of coming up with a combination of language, which was stay alert, which the message was being fed by everybody, stay alert, and then the total random lies that were coming out from, you know, Boris, etc. And yeah, so I was kind of mashing these two sort of concepts together, so stay alert for truth twisters. And I originally started to make that kind of in a really, I don't know, kind of angry colour palette and like protesty, and then I actually wanted it to be the opposite. I wanted it to feel quite vibrant. So I started creating these other things linked to it. So this one's like a lie is gonna lie. What else was there? Some other ones. Keep reading into them. Yeah, I make the rules so I can break them. Underfunded, undereducated, under control. So it's all these like angry little posts, but really kind of bright colours and suck you in. You go, oh, what's that about? Oh, so it's something about this kind of contrast of colours and kind of this kind of combination as well. Again, more prints for the print shop, and I started trying to really work with language and words as well. So kind of the words that you can say in the fewest amount of words and how that can talk to somebody. So with something like this just says, okay, no. And I kind of come up with this kind of, sort of feels kind of lava lampy, and I think when I first posted it, I just said something like, this is about boundaries, which it is, and people were coming to me and going, oh my god, yeah, you know, like, oh yeah, that means something to me. And it's weird that like 3 little words that don't really say that much can connect with people. So yeah, that was kind of the thing that I just carried on with. So something like this was budget. This was for Altrincham Arts Festival, and it was this message, and again it's when everybody was starting to come together again, and it was outside a little coffee shop, so there was 2 minions. It was kind of like, you know, budget, there's a big table and you can fit everybody on it, and kind of, you know, like just make room, you like make people feel welcome and all of those things. There's a bit of conflict about this at the time because it was just after social distancing, so people were a bit weird about that. And there are obviously different ways to do it. I've just started working with these awesome animators, so they've been bringing some of my typography to life as well, which really adds to it and kind of enables it to be shared easier so more people can see it. So there's that. What have I put there? Oh yeah, so I don't know, I think one of the things that I really like about this is that you can communicate quite hard, difficult subjects through simplicity and optimism and simple words, and it doesn't have to be lectury or, you know, angry. It can be quite subtle and it can speak to people in that way. So something like this, I've just worked with the Women for Iran group in Manchester, which are obviously having a flipping nightmare at the moment. So with something like this, I was able to give them something to take out to protest, to, you know, use as posters and things like that. So again, it's just a few little words, and we can kind of, you know, like, I don't know, we can speak for people, and we can kind of help them to communicate as well. And let me finish. Yeah, I don't know what to do. I think this is near the end. And this was one of the latest prints that I've done. And this was something I kept saying to myself, well, it's kind of cheesy this, it's like this exact moment. But it's kind of one of those things that we get all these messages all the time, and it can be like, oh, love every moment, all of those things. And sometimes the moments are just rubbish, but every so often something will happen, and you'll think, oh my god, that was really good. And there's been a lot of things that have happened over the past few years that, we've had to reevaluate. Things with my family, all sorts of stuff. So there was something about, if something good was happening, and I could say to myself, oh, this exact moment, this is really good. So sometimes, some of these prints are kind of just for me. And with something like this, I could screen print it. I kind of gave it a bit of a Bowie vibe on this one. Again, super, super simple, not massively legible. I kind of keep everyone kind of guessing. But yeah, that's what that is. So I'm going to finish by saying communication. I think it was the theme like communication. What was that? Communication. Not decoration, which I agree with. But for me now, I think communication and decoration, I really want both. I think I want both. I think that was it. So yeah, that's it.
Brilliant, fantastic. You just can see the journey there. That's a quick question for us.
Yes.
Do you now concentrate on other types of ways of managing to make a living by just doing?
No. Not at the moment, no. It's still quite split. I'd say it's still quite 50-50 between branding and the typography. A lot of the typography is things, like I say, for my print shop, but I'm getting more people now asking for that. So I think it feeds off each other. And a lot of the branding work I get now is different because people are seeing the typography work and kind of wanting a slightly different direction. So yeah, I think I would say it's 50-50 really.
And the pandemic really started off, didn't it? Is that right?
Yeah,
just drawing.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have any proper work, so I was like, no clients. They were all just, yeah. I've literally spent all this time building up for these arts clients because that's really what I wanted to do. But I hadn't planned the global pandemic, so I had to sort of future-proof that. So yeah, it was more just about making some things because I don't know, I kind of just needed a bit of an outlet.
Yeah.
So.
Right, any questions?
Have you ever considered would you ever see yourself in the future taking on interns and then building the studio up like more?
Well, actually, I did take on an intern just before Christmas for the first time. It was a really good experience actually. What I did do, because it's obviously it's a small company, it's me in a tiny room, I tried to be quite upfront about that. But it was really helpful, but we did like a day, a week for a month, so it wasn't too much for me because I'm not always in the studio as well, I work quite flexibly. But yeah, she came in the first Monday of every month, and it was really helpful actually, it was really good. I think it is something that I would carry on doing. But at the moment, again, with the way work is, it's quite unpredictable at the moment, so I'm kind of waiting for it to settle down. But I would definitely take on interns again. Probably in that way where it's not the same as a traditional internship at a big studio. It wouldn't be the same experience. But yeah, and in terms of growing the studio, I'm not so sure actually because I really like it. I really like the flexibility of just working with just it being me. And the way I work at the moment is because I'll work with a brand strategist if I'm working on a project or a photographer or an illustrator. So I kind of build these little teams anyway. But nobody's on the payroll, there's no stress, and I feel like that's the right way for me, so I think it's kind of balancing it out. But definitely with the internships, that is something I think ideally would be good to do, and I'm hoping to pick that up again later in the year, depending on the recession. So, yeah.
Question? Oh, at the back. Hi. Since you've had a kind of an interesting journey with towards Manchester, is there any place you want to go now? Or anywhere you want to work on?
Well, in terms of places, actually, I really want some international clients actually. I mean, because really, I really want to just like not lose them all. I quite like to just spend a lot of time, like dotting around everywhere. So I definitely like to do that. Got my own like Paris and Amsterdam and New York and things like that. And in terms of clients, I'd kind of like to do some again with something much more with the typography, but it'd be good to do something quite fashion based as well actually, because that was something I was interested in at the beginning. I quite like the opportunity to build that into a project as well, I think.
Thank you. Any more questions before we draw the raffle? Oh, there's one here. Brilliant.
Hello. I remember finishing uni and not being able to find a job and thinking, right, I'm just going to set up and do it myself. What advice would you give to anyone who finds themselves in that situation?
Well, actually, I think a lot more people are finding themselves in that situation, and it is difficult. So I would say one is trying to find a community in terms of going to events, going to things, getting in touch with people, working co-working spaces, because it is always about the people that you meet. I think some of the advice that you gave earlier in just do projects, you're like, just make things. If you haven't got work, just do stuff. Do stuff that you want to, send it to people, show people, share everything. Like, social media is a complete pain, but it's a way for you to share your work. And I think once you get over that hurdle of thinking, like, and not thinking about likes or any of that stuff, it's a place where people can find you. So I think those things I would say. And maybe trying to get to a bit of knowledge with things like, kind of like accounting, craft, all that sort of hard stuff that you don't necessarily, we're not really geared up to know. So any like little courses, or there's a lot of kind of free business support as well that you can access. So I get on things like that as well.
I guess everyone.
Thank you. Mainly out of curiosity, since you've gone independent, I wanted to ask you, have you thought about maybe expanding and creating your own agency in the future?
I have considered it, but I just don't think I want to do it. I think I'm just super flexible. I can kind of, just go where I want, work where I want. I think I've really struggled to go back and I just don't want the stress. I want nice work, but I want it super flexible and really nice.
Right. Should we have a raffle, reckon? Yeah. You can ask Dani, possibly hang around maybe 5 minutes. So yeah,
Before it releases, how many prizes are there today? 8.